So when you look at in a fighting situation, when you're going out there and you're putting your hands and feet against another opponent, and it's like you're going in there till the referee pulls you off. You're going in there to destroy them, and you're going there to conquer them and beat them. And the air that you need to have about you and confidence you need to have about you to go out there in combat, half naked in front of a whole bunch of people to literally, put punishment on one another. It takes a tremendous amount of confidence and strength, and almost, if you look at it, almost a level of arrogance, because you have to be sure that you're going in there and you can beat that guy. Not doubting. The moment you doubt even a little bit, if you're like, I believe I can beat, nah, you're in trouble.
Hey, my name is Steve Hinton, and I serve as a pastor and author.
And I'm your co-host, Matthias. I serve as a personal trainer and a volunteer at my local church.
We want to welcome you to The Man Identity, a podcast that is dedicated to calling up young men into purposeful manhood, which is ultimately found in Jesus Christ and being made in the image of God.
In a culture that is often deliberately set against young men, we're here to intentionally build hope, clarity, and strength into the hearts of these men who are searching for purpose. Together, we will face tough issues head on, throw down some weekly challenges, and have some fun along the way.
Because solid manhood is not automatic, but rather it's a choice. We're here to walk alongside you and encourage you to live out your authentic identity in being made in the image of God for a purpose larger than you have ever imagined.
So join us now for another episode of The Man Identity.
I don't know if it would have been elementary school, junior high, high school, college, or a young man, but Matthias, can you remember a time as a younger man where you ever got in a fight? I mean, a real fight. Fight type thing.
Okay, I don't even know if you could count them as a real fight.
Okay.
But there was a couple of times when I almost got into a fight or was kind of in a semi-fight. But yeah, so yes, the short answer is yes. Long answer is a little bit different.
Long answer. Well, that's probably true of a lot of guys. There's the short answer and the long answer. The funny thing about my fighting career, I didn't fight a lot as a kid, but the last fist fight I got in was actually when I was a senior in high school.
Yeah.
And I walked into this corridor and there were these two girls, and I knew both girls, not really well, but these two girls were going at it. And I thought, well, this is dumb. And then I jumped in to try to break them apart. Well, the brother of one of the girls at that point in the time, he jumped me because he wanted the two girls to fight it out.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it, sometimes men get together, guys get together, and, especially older guys will talk about fights in their past. And that brings up questions about what it is to be a man. We live in a confused time, confused culture, where a lot of forces are saying not only is there toxic masculinity, but masculinity in itself is toxic.
Yeah.
And, we want to teach a young man to be in control of his strength. Well, you can't teach him to be in control of his strength if you tell him he has no strength, that he is weak. And so there's this tension on one hand of just bad, Andrew Tate just being a jerk and always whooping up on people. And then there's this passivity. And there are so many young men in our culture today who they're just passive. Not only will they not stand up for themselves, they won't stand up for others, or they won't live with a purposeful life. They won't get up and doing things. And I think part of the key there, for example, Jesus said that we're to turn the other cheek, and there's a context for that. Personally, someone insults me or whatever, I just need to turn the other cheek. But if someone's coming after my wife, I need to stand up and defend her. But there's this tension between passivity and strength. And actually, there's a biblical word that I find very interesting. We see the word translated meek, and we see it translated that way more often in the old King James Version. In some of the new translations, like the New International Version, we find meek a couple times, but a lot of times it's translated as gentleness. And there's even a misunderstanding as to what that means, not only in culture, but even within the church. There's this idea that, if I'm going to be a man, a godly man, that means I need to be passive as well. And I just don't see that in Scripture.
Right.
So that brings us to the fun guest that we have today, Michael Scionti. And if you meet Michael, you're going to know Michael is originally from New York. York. I can't say that. Michael is our part-time worship director at the church where I preach at, Cypress Crossings Christian Church here in Houston, Texas. And Michael is incredibly talented.
Oh, yeah. He's a huge
talented.
blessing to our church. Yeah.
Yeah, he is. But see, it's not just that, because I've worked with worship people before who are very talented, and it's all about them. Mm-hmm. And Michael is an incredibly humble guy as well. He wants a team victory. Yeah. He wants God to be glorified. But here's the connection with this. I was able to sit with Michael and just hear some of his story, some of his wisdom, some biblical illustrations as to what true meekness is. And if we want to be men of purpose, if we want to find our identity first in being created in the image of God, then we have to understand that we do have power, but we have to wield it in the right kind of way. And Michael addresses that, and I'm excited for the conversation. I'm hoping our listeners can get a lot out of it today.
Yeah. And this is actually a concept I'm not... Like, if I were given the question or the topic of this for a podcast, I honestly wouldn't have known how to respond, like what to say in this. So it was actually, I think Michael was the perfect person, has the perfect illustrations to really get the concept across. So it was actually really, really good for me too. So I'm looking forward to the viewer hearing this. Why don't we dive right in?
I remember being over at this guy's house in the 8th grade, and it was a Friday night. And there were 3 movies that came out, and I think we watched 2 of them that night, but it was a series. Enter the Ninja, Return of the Ninja, Revenge of the Ninja. And it was funny, I made one of my boys watch that with me about 2 or 3 years ago, and I thought, this is so stupid. But when I was in junior high, that was the coolest thing, watching those ninja movies. I mean, those were power guys.
Absolutely.
A little bit before your time, but and I know part of your story, but you could probably do some ninjutsu and whoop up on me if you wanted to.
but we're friends, so that doesn't need to happen. So,
how many belts do you have?
So what is your deal? So I've been doing martial arts since I was pretty young. I have a 3rd-degree black belt in traditional Chung Kwon Taekwondo. Okay. I also have a blue belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu under the Gracies, and I have a blue belt in Judo as well under a good friend of mine, Coach Matt Malone. So I've trained a lot of different types of martial arts over my life, and I was just like you talked about. I was one of those kids that was inspired by said movies like that. I remember seeing Bruce Lee and seeing this one guy walk into a room, and and he wasn't a big guy. That was a big thing, because as a little kid, I wasn't a big guy. I wasn't a man yet, but seeing this one guy go in there and just without fear dismantle an entire group of people was pretty awesome. Now, obviously, as you grow older and as you start studying martial arts, it's like, oh, that's not exactly how it works. And, then, years later when the UFC came out and you really were exposed to different types of martial arts, and you see this, skinny guy, in a gi, go out there and just completely destroy everybody. And that's when I really was like, man, what is that? That's a superpower.
Right.
And then, it's wild.
One of the modern movies, The Ip Man.
Yeah.
The Ip Man. There's like 3 or 4 installments of that. And there's power, there's control. And I was looking forward to talking to you about that.
Oh, yeah.
But we're talking about power and how that fits into our discussions about being a man.
Yep.
And we live in this culture where there's always this tension. And, we can go back to when I was born, generation prior to that. And, the culture said a real man's like John Wayne. And shortly after that, there was a series comedy that came out called MASH, Mobile Army Surgical Hospital. Yep. And the lead guy, Hawkeye, Alan Alda, and he was kind of I don't want to say effeminate, that's not right, but kind of a laid back, just, romantic type guy.
Yep.
And so, is that what a real man is? And in our present culture, in our present context, I'm reminded of episode number 1 where I brought up Andrew Tate. And I had written an article about Andrew Tate in a journal called Renew almost a year ago. And Andrew Tate is just like a jerk. Just call it like it is. But so many young men are following him because so often in our culture, young men are pushed down. They're bad, but yet we know we've got adventure in us.
Yeah.
And Tate's a guy who pushes back and says, "No, I am a man. I am strong, and you need to get out there and make your way in the world.
Yeah.
I mean, you're on top." And I thought about this earlier today, and going back to that article, one of the last paragraphs in the article, I said this, thinking back to John Eldredge, and John Eldredge wrote a book called Wild at Heart. Eldredge rightly identifies that boys and young men without a godly role model will either overcompensate for their wounds and become driven, violent men, or they will shrink back and go passive, retreating men. It is clear that the former accurately describes Andrew Tate. We don't want that. It is also clear that the latter in Eldredge's statement depicts legions of young men in our world today. We don't want that either. But unless we deliberately point them to Christ, one of those two is exactly what we were going to find ourselves with. So it was Michael, was this idea of trying to look at Jesus, but that also kind of brings some confusion. I think of passages where Jesus says we are to turn the other cheek. And one of my professors in college said that context is king.
Yeah.
And a lot of that passage is, it's you and me, you're not being right with me. I'm not going to mess with you. But by golly, if you come in here and mess with my wife, I'm going to stomp you.
You can throw down, yeah.
Right. But there are other passages, for example, in Matthew chapter 5, where it's referred to as the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus is delivering this idea, this principle of the kingdom-mindedness. And he makes a statement in Matthew chapter 5 where he says, "Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth." Michael, the first time you heard that verse, read it or heard it, what came to mind when you heard "Blessed are the meek"?
Yeah, so when I was little, because I've been in church for a long time since I was a kid, I always thought meek, I think meek is a mouse, something that's simple and small and, that, doesn't want to bother anybody. Like, many would say passive or just unheard, but, and so that thought is like, okay, the meek are going to inherit the earth. So, okay, so the people that didn't cause any problems, the people that were just kind of hiding and, doing their, due diligence, keeping their head down. I don't want any trouble, that kind of, that's what I always thought of, as a kid. Like when I thought of that word, I was like meekness. Okay, it's meek and mild and soft and not standing up for anything. That kind of thing.
And that understanding probably goes against the heart of a lot of men.
Yeah.
You've got a guy who loves America.
Yeah.
We need more people who love their country. I mean, you could be listening to this from England. I hope you love your country.
Yeah.
But you got a guy who loves his country and he wants to go defend his country.
Sure.
You got a guy who loves his city. He wants to be a police officer.
Yep.
So what do you do when there's a bad guy burning something up or taking something over and you come across "Blessed are the meek"? I mean, okay, so Michael, what is that word? What does that word mean?
So meekness, and that's a big thing that I really look at. And I think Joe Rogan brought up the same point where he was actually talking about on a podcast where he was like, it says in the Bible, the meek shall inherit the earth. And it was during a time when there were a lot of different people that were very, bold in their ideas and, shouting from the rooftops of what they thought. And that it was almost like, man, well, those are the people that are going to inherit the earth. It's these people that are soft people, as we would say. You haven't been through any struggles, haven't really identified anything but their ideas, and somehow they're going to inherit the earth. Well, there's a whole, concept. When we really look at the word meekness, we think it rhymes with what it sounds like, weakness. Weak,
But it doesn't mean weak.
It does not mean weak at all. The biggest thing about meekness is meekness really defines to, and I'm not going to give the exact definition, but what it calls to is that meekness is power under control.
I think that's a good definition, yeah.
It's power under restraint. So when you look at someone like, when it calls men to be meek and mild, meaning, if you're strong and you train, I think that's part of the Andrew Tate thing, that you're kind of talking about. Andrew Tate at core is a fighter. So when you look at, in a fighting situation, when you're going out there and you're putting your hands and feet against another opponent, and it's like you're going in there till the referee pulls you off. You're going in there to destroy them, and you're going there to conquer them and beat them. And the the air that you need to have about you and confidence you need to have about you to go out there in combat, half naked in front of a whole bunch of people to literally, put punishment on one another. It takes a tremendous amount of confidence and strength, and almost, if you look at almost a level of arrogance, because you have to be sure that you're going in there and you can beat that guy. Not doubting. The moment you doubt even a little bit, if you're like, I believe I can beat, nah, you're in trouble. So that whole, pretentious then point of thinking, well, I don't want to be meek and mild because that's weakness. Well, there's a difference. Like you'll see some fighters, even in the UFC, and I've seen them in matches where that person they hit him with a shot and you see that guy go down, their eyes are rolled in the back of the head, and they could deliver that final stroke, and they hold back.
Restraint.
There's restraint there. There's understanding. They're saying, hey, I could do this, but I'm not going to. I have the power to win, to destroy, to even take a life. And I mean, through my years of martial arts training, you're dealing with people that want to calculate strength. I've trained guys that are bigger than me, and they look at me, they're like, well, what are you going to do to me? And then when they realize it's what they don't know is actually what they should be afraid of.
Right.
It's not, because anyone can calculate strength and look at a bigger guy. But then also when you're on the mat and you're working with these guys, and I know Gracie shocked the world with his aspect, not a movie aspect, but when he went out there, he looked thin, he looked frail, he looked, as many people would say, weak. But the whole point of jiu-jitsu, and that's one of the arts I study, is about the negotiation. The idea is not to break your opponent, choke your opponent. Sure, that's all of it. But what they gave is always the opportunity for the opponent to surrender.
Okay.
Because in chokes and in any arm locks, if you wanted to, when you have someone in a position or an armbar, a kimura, or Americana, you could, on your own fruition, just break that limb, rip the shoulder out of the socket, choke them unconscious. They'll be out. I mean, 6 seconds, they're unconscious. 10 seconds or more, you hold on, they might not wake up again. It might be that. So it's the concept of restraint and being able to have power, but not go all the way.
And I love what you said earlier, strength under control.
Yeah.
I think I heard it, I don't remember where, but the idea of Pharaoh in the Old Testament and the horses of Pharaoh, that those stallions, those horses, they were incredibly powerful.
Yes.
But the strength was under control. So that it's not so much controlling our strength, other than if our identity is in Christ, He is.
Yeah.
But we've got the strength, but we're not allowing the strength to control us. We're controlling the strength.
Yeah, and that's something you said is actually important. Like in horse training, everything like that, a wild stallion is wild and they're powerful, but their full potential is never met until they actually give in to a submission. When they learn, and all of a sudden that trainer can train them. I've met so many athletes that are incredibly talented and they're amazing and they're really strong and they're really this. But if they don't know what to do, if they're not governed by something, if they're not put under some sort of established control, they'll just be wild. That's all they'll ever be. They'll never be, and they may be really strong, but they'll never be great. And I think the interesting part about meekness, strength under control, is really found and associated with greatness in so many ways. For someone that can just calculate strength and go, and I'm bigger than you, that's my spot, they only get so far.
Yeah.
It's calculation, and you look at a lot of the bigger aspects of life and society, and there's always a want and desire and a will to dominate others. And sometimes it works out for them. But sometimes there's that other person that's powerful as well that says, wait a minute, is this right?
And I think we want to get to Jesus anyway, but on another subject, and I mentioned this last week in talking with Matthias, Mark chapter 10, but that may be off. But James and John come to Jesus and they say, hey, we want to be your number 1 and 2 guy. And Jesus brings all the disciples together and he says, don't you know that power structure in this world is that they're the ones who lord it over you, run on your back, run you over, but it's not like that in the kingdom. And then Jesus talks about the fact that true greatness is actually in serving others. But with Jesus, the thing that comes to my mind first is when he's standing before Pilate, and in the latter part of the book of John, and Pilate knows that this is a kangaroo court. Pilate knows that the religious political leaders of the Hebrews are trying to make Jesus a sacrifice. And he tries to get Jesus to do what he wants him to do. And then eventually Pilate goes,
don't you realize that I have the power, to hand you over?
Yeah.
And Jesus says, well, actually, you don't have any power if it wasn't given to you from above.
Right.
And the way that Jesus is standing there so confidently, and maybe it's in Luke where they take him over to Herod, and Herod's trying to get Jesus to do this and do this and do this, and Jesus is just very calm.
Yeah.
And I thought, that's strength right there.
Yeah.
He's not letting people poke his buttons.
Yeah.
And that's huge in our culture today. I mean, it's like, man, I'm mad. Why? Somebody poked me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And but what are some other illustrations, Michael, of Jesus or other guys in the Bible that demonstrated or illustrated the idea of strength under control, being meek?
Yeah. There's a couple, and I'll end with Jesus. So I'll start with a couple other guys that you look at. I mean, let's talk about, Moses had a lot. If you think about, what he looks about is, going from being basically, the kid of the pharaohs to all of a sudden going out and, coming back not by his power, but having to submit, going back into the land that you grew up in and being able to exercise not your power, but realizing that there was something bigger in there for you, knowing what he may face going back into the courts. Mm-hmm. And I could even imagine, like, even the pharaohs, people knew who he was. They were like, oh, it's Moses. What do you want? And all of a sudden, he's bringing something up there. And, at first, it talks about him being dismissed. Very hard, especially as anyone that goes in, it's like, the guy walks in there, well, I'm going to give him a piece of my mind. And all of a sudden, they're, sent home packing with tail between their legs, so to speak. And I think Moses had a lot to do with the factor of his trust in God to give him that strength.
I like that.
And that power,
trusting in God,
that was wielding through what he was doing to not take that power for himself. That I think is a lot of times, and we see it in in politics and everything, that people hit certain points of government, and all of a sudden that's their power. That's not the power. Like the office they represent becomes their own, what they believe is authority. I know the phrase, absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Yes,
right. That's a big thing. That when you're given power, what do you do with it? I think another great example is, Joseph. You talk about a guy, he has this dream, right?
Yeah.
That his brothers are going to come and they're going to bow before him and everything like that. And he's like, man, that was a cool dream, right, guys? Guys, as they're looming down to him, beat him up, throw him in a pit, leave him basically for dead. But not even that, they sell him off. And the moment that he goes through, when one day his brothers are standing before of him, they don't even recognize him because he has transformed so much beyond anything they can imagine, that the very dream he had now come, and he had the power to just...
He could have struck him down.
Oh, with nothing. He could have done it probably himself, and no one would have batted an eye because he had that much power. But he chose to not exercise the power that he had, but the power that God gave him, and that's that grace.
And I wonder if Joseph had that power when he was a younger man. In other words, I wonder if it was a process of, okay, Joseph realizes in the early chapters there, hey, they're going to be bowing down to me. And some scholars, historians, theologians think that he was kind of arrogant, and maybe he was. Yeah. But there's definitely this transition. Yeah. And maybe we can get an idea of what meekness is a little bit more after we've been beat up some. Yeah. Because the tendency is to want to, well, I'm going to fight back. I'm going to get even. Problem with getting even, you never get even. You always get a little bit more. Yeah. And it just, that's a beautiful, latter part, Genesis chapter 52, he said, and you meant this for evil. Yeah. God meant it for good. That somehow in God's providence, he was doing something there.
And I think you really hit on a good point that brings me to my next guy, and that's David. And something that you said is very important. I think any kind of, and of course, martial arts, I'm going to use martial arts reference.
That's why you're here, man.
But any of the things, what I would think is, even if, in many of our lives, if you're going to be great one day, God comes down and says, hey, you're going to be great. It's going to be awesome. But how are you going to get there?
And what does greatness mean?
Right. What does it mean?
Are we thinking in the eyes of the world, or are we thinking a different standard?
Yeah. So the coolest thing about that is you look at a guy like David. And when we look about it is when you have that level of greatness established, for you off the front, but when you see these people doing great things later on, where did they get there? And I look at it in martial artists is every kid, we say, what's your goal? And they're like, black belt. All right. Well, cool. That's your goal right now. Well, what's it going to take to get that black belt? And it's the training. And And when you look at all these guys, they went through training. And girl, anyone that achieves anything, something I used to tell my students, anything worth having is never easily obtained. If something's easy to get, question it. Because if it just comes easy, and I think that's with triumph, a lot of people don't look at something. If you go on a ride, you look at a roller coaster, and you just go down the roller coaster, and it's like, oh, that was awesome. But that time when you went out and you did something difficult, you overcame something, you went through some sort of hardship, you remember that for years and years. And even if it kind of sucked at that time, you're like, man, that was really hard. There's joy in that. There's fun in that. And I think what's really cool about that, you know, Joseph one day would have that, you know, he would have the grains bowing down to him. He would have all these things bowing down to him. But the training he went through, whether when he was in one house, years.
Prison for Pharaoh's prison for a while.
Yeah, you think about that. He finally gets good. He, you know, he's in there. Okay, I'm not a slave anymore. I'm a slave, but I'm doing pretty good. And then all of a sudden, Potiphar's wife comes over, and he ends up right back in jail.
Yeah.
And I know he could be like, God, what the heck? You know, like what happened? And you look at David too. I think what's so amazing about David, as I always looked at David as imagine he was a crazy martial artist. Because if you look at about it, you know, he's a shepherd, right? But
who took down a bear?
Who took down a bear, and that was okay. That was number one. And I'm sure before there was a bear, there was maybe a wolf, there was maybe a dog, maybe some knuckleheads that came in trying to mess with him, maybe even his brothers that you know, poo-pooed him. But at the same time, his father entrusted him with the flock, which was their life's blood. There was their financial, a lot of different things with that. But I think what's so awesome about is David's realization to the training that he went through to make him great. Any young men that I would ever talk to, or you know, someone, you know, a parent would come in saying like, I want to, you know, I want my son or I want my daughter to build confidence. You know, I want to do that. And what I always tell them is, you know what, learn to get good at something and see that you can do it, and you will gain confidence whenever you're playing an instrument
small successes.
Little things. And that's what it was for God trained both of these men in little successes.
Yeah, it wasn't this big, huge. I mean, yeah, eventually there's a big, huge victory, but it's all these, you know, celebrating all of these little victories.
And that's when David says, like, you know what, if you look at it, and I've seen men that are the size of bears. I've seen men that move like lions. I've seen all these things. And David's saying, you know what, if he was given Goliath right off the bat, and God would say, you could take this guy out, he may have freaked out. But the fact that he said, you know what, there was a bear one time.
Right.
And God delivered it unto me, meaning that God gave him the capabilities, not that God just said, oh, you know, killed the bear for him. No, God gave him the skill and ability to handle that situation. The lion comes along. God gave him the skill and ability to handle that situation. So if he said, hey, if God did this for me, this guy is nothing because God has strengthened me to do this. And I think that's a big thing is if you're just wild and you're just strong, but you never submit, like the horse you said, they have tremendous power, but they need to submit to a governing authority that trains them to be strong, but under control.
Let me ask you about this, because let me tell you why in the illustration. Sometimes we want training that's exciting. We want life that's exciting. We want things to happen. A lot of times, you know, unless we're an accountant or something, and one of my good friends is an accountant.
God bless the accountants.
But a lot of young men, they want the adventure. And we get bored with the boring. But I'm reminded of a karate show that came in the mid-'80s, the original Karate Kid. And you know, Mr. Miyagi and Daniel, and he's painting the fence post all, you know, like hour and hour and hour and hour. What was your thought on something like that? It's, you know, same move, you're going to do it a billion times.
I
mean, does that really work?
So the interesting part, and I'll reference another movie too. There's an older movie than that, is The Drunken Master with Jackie Chan, the original one.
Okay.
And he goes and he finds this ancient master, kind of like the same thing. Daniel's son goes and finds Mr. Miyagi. And this is actually, and I'll carry on to a restraint that a lot of instructors deal with this challenge. They know the material and they're teaching it over and over again. And a lot of instructors actually, they get bored.
Okay.
And then they start experimenting. And it's not a bad thing, but, and I'll explain why. It's not bad for them, but it's terrible for the student. So what happens in this movie is Jackie Chan is training to be this new master. and learn this martial art. And he's like, all right, you're going to teach me, the special fist, because this master showed him how good of a fighter he is. And now he's waiting to learn this move the whole time. And just like Daniel was like, I want to learn to kick. I want to learn all this. And they're like, no. You got to do this, 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 this. And what he was doing, and at the very end of the sequence, after he's done, and he has him like breaking walnuts with his hands, filling up buckets with like just doing all these crazy things that make no sense. There's no punch, there's no kick, there's no power. It's just torture. But then at the very end, when all of a sudden he goes out and he's dealing with this fight, and he's like, man, I don't know any moves. And all of a sudden the dude swings a stick at him and he catches it in his hand. And he's like, and the guy goes to pull the stick away, and he's like, wait a minute. That it was that little what seemed like mindless training. And his master goes, I needed your body to get strong enough to actually be able to do the real thing.
Wow, that's interesting.
And it was
that's encouraging, because I know so many young men, it's like, man, I'm tired of the routine. But part of being a man is just you just get out of bed and you just show up.
You just do it.
You just show up day after day after day. Yeah.
And that's the thing is, like, I think most people, they say, oh, well, in the business world, they say, people don't want easy. What do they want? Well, they want purpose. They want reason to do it. And some of the things that we do, like if you look at the guy that goes to the gym and he does the same 10 sets every day, and he just does it. If he doesn't see progress, it gets frustrating. And I think in the world of martial arts, and any martial artist that's listening, they understand this. We hit plateaus where we're doing good and we're destroying everyone. We're doing so good. And also we get to this level and we're like, man, I'm going to be this. And all of a sudden we start getting our butts kicked again. We're like, well, wait a minute. I'm at this level. I'm supposed to be really good. And all of a sudden we realize, oh, there's a whole nother level that now I'm being exposed to. And like, it's very disheartening, because you're like, man, I thought I did so good. I was beating up all these other lower ranked guys. And now all of a sudden I'm playing with these big guys and they're crushing me. I don't know what happened. And I dealt with it a few times in my careers, and it's usually right before you almost hit that expert level.
Right.
You're hitting that black belt, which unbeknownst to most people, black belt is not the end. Far from it. I had my one instructor say, congratulations, you are now an expert of the basics. After 6 years of training, I was an expert of the basics.
See, the thing that came to my mind when that kid said, you asked the kid, okay, what is your goal? And I want to be a black belt.
Yeah.
There's a part of me, Michael, that says, and
then what do you want to do with that?
Yeah, like, okay, you want to get married someday? You want to have kids someday? Do you want to have posterity? It's like, if you're just looking for a black belt, that's like, I mean, it's a skill, it's a craft.
It's an achievement,
It's
right?
an achievement,
Yeah.
but character is deeper than achievement.
Yeah. I think what you said is important. It's something we teach in a teaching methodology. I worked with Rener and Ryron Gracie for quite a while in training on their teaching methodology of jiu-jitsu, which was really fascinating. And a lot of things that I see, I think we can apply it to biblical studies, to anything we do. And anything worth learning, there should be a couple areas that we understand on how to do it. And that's what it is that we're doing. How to do it, that's a big factor. But the other factor is why.
Why?
And a lot of people stop right there. And even the Gracie's teaching does stop at the why. But I add a fourth, and that's apply.
Yes.
Because we know what we're doing, we know how to do it. Okay, now we know why we do it. Like with a technique, you understand. Okay, this is what we're going to do. This is what we're looking to accomplish. We're looking to choke or do an arm bar. Well, how are we going to do it? Okay, we're going to trap the wrist. We're going to control the arm. We're going to make sure they can't escape us. So we're going to hold them in position. Well, why are we doing that? Well, because if we don't control this, they're going to get away. If we don't keep their posture down, they're going to be able to hit us. They're going to be able to hurt us. But then taking that, understanding that, and then finally being able to apply it. I think that's a big factor, with not just martial arts, but life in general.
Yeah.
We read the Bible, we see what God wants us to do. He then tells us how to do it. Like, these are the steps. And he gives us the why. But the one thing that he doesn't do is our free will. It is up to us to apply it.
Yeah.
It's up to us to really say, okay, I'm going to do that. All the lessons that we learn, and I know anyone going through struggle, that feels they're in a wilderness. I know I've felt it. I think all of us have felt it. Is a lot of times we're looking at the struggle and we're like, what, God, what am I doing? Why, I'm stuck here. How am I doing this? How is this happening? But why am I here? Instead of looking at what God is trying to teach us to apply in our life. Not just look at the wilderness, but look what God's trying to get us to learn while we're there.
Yeah, I would say that Christianity is actually very practical.
Yeah.
That we're created for a purpose. we work that out. So going back to Jesus, I thought of Jesus before Pilate and Herod when we went to the cross, but there were some other things that came to your mind. And Jesus is the perfect man. You know, he's the divine Son of God.
Yep.
He was also the perfect man, so he is the ideal. So what were some other thoughts that you had about?
So I think it's no accident that Jesus was a carpenter, because, like you said, as far as his ability to craft things, and there's measurement to that. There is control with that. You can't just, like they say, measure twice, cut once. There was definitely craft to what he did. But I think Jesus' most meek moment, right? Now remember, if we say meek moment, we gotta use our new definition. It's power under restraint.
Yeah.
Is when they're actually arresting him in the garden.
Yeah.
And these soldiers are there and they're going to take him. And there's that. And it's like in martial artists, they call like the void. There's a time when you're faced off with your opponent and there's a certain amount of distance it's going to take them to get to you where they can touch you. And there's a certain amount of distance going the opposite way. And that void is that in between. So as these soldiers were crossing the void, and it says in the Bible that, then Jesus started to speak. And it was like they were frozen in place.
Yeah, they fell back, and it says in Mark.
And it's like, whoa, what just happened? And I think the words that Jesus says are so collected in that exact moment. It's like they're ready to take him, and they're ready to take a man. They didn't realize what they were dealing with. And he says, do you not think that I could not call upon 12 legions of angels to come to my aid? At that moment, I could only imagine the heavenly host being like, is he calling us?
Is he calling us?
You see Michael start to unsheathe that sword, and in that time, it gives me chills just thinking about it. I'm very connected with this kind of stuff. But the fact that it states that the soldiers were physically restrained by some unknown thing, that something pushed them back, that then Jesus says, "But this is the hour when darkness reigns."
Yeah, and so why did Jesus do that? And we kind of touched on it, but this idea of submission. That Jesus was submitting to the Father, and I think trust.
Yeah.
That part of submission is, okay, I could take care of this myself.
Yeah.
Or I can trust God.
Yeah.
For the better outcome. So Jesus, the Son of God, is trusting God the Father.
Yeah.
In this plan of redemption.
Yep.
That he would be the sacrifice for my sin and rise again.
It was definitely a main character moment, as the kids would say nowadays.
I like that.
It was, and I think what it really, ties it up with him is like it was really the last thing Jesus said that really showed his true meekness, and that, but not just the restraint, but the true power that he came packing with. So Jesus is, now at the point he's been beaten, he's barely alive physically, and his accusers are standing before him as he's about to get put on this cross, or exactly, I don't know the exact context of time when he said this exactly, but I believe he was actually crucified at this point. He was on the cross and he was beaten, and they're saying, well, what do you say now, Jesus? And there's this mockery that's going on, and they're spitting at him, they're saying all these different things. And I think it was one of the coolest, I think it's one of the most powerful things, and I didn't understand it at first, but they're saying, well, what do you say, Jesus? What do you say? You talked a good game, what do you say now? And I think Jesus has the most powerful moment ever. He says, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. Now, there's so many things happening in that moment when he says this word. Translated, it says, my God, why have you forsaken me? And people that don't understand the context are hearing it, and they're saying, what's he doing? He's calling out to Elijah. Oh, he's possessed by demon spirits. The craziest part is the people he spoke to were the Pharisees and the people that were there that knew he wasn't saying his words, but he was quoting scripture from the Psalms written 1,000 years before by David. That when he says, my God, why have you forsaken me? And then when you go through that, I believe it's Psalm 22.
Yes.
You keep going through that, and Jesus is literally looking, and I can almost imagine like a little smirk in his, in his heart, that proud, that man power right there, that true restraint to almost look at them and it's like, what do you think I'm going to say? My God, why have you forsaken me? Guys, check that scripture. And if you look at that scripture, and what you will see how it ends. He describes and quotes a scripture written 1,000 years before of exactly what was happening that moment. And I could imagine being a Pharisee looking at it, it's like, what did he just say? What did he just say? And then all of a sudden he sees, oh no, we just mocked him. And you look, his hands and his feet were, This was written 1,000 years. Wait a minute. They're casting lots. What are we doing? Oh, no. And I could almost see that little calm confidence right there. Jesus knew the end was written right there 1,000 years before. That was the beginning right now of the fulfillment of that prophecy.
I like that connection because that's not where I thought you were going.
Oh, surprise.
I thought you were going to where Jesus said, Father, forgive them for they know not what they were doing.
That too.
That too. But yeah, and that's, we talk about how we can trust the Bible and reasons to believe all this, but there are over 300 messianic prophecies, and that was one of them.
He fulfilled it.
He fulfilled that right there.
And that he had, and why I would say that, because I think that's, the real, key thing is, Jesus died for this. Jesus was strong for us, and that's like the real key moment that everyone remembers is, Father, forgive them. They know not what they do, right there. That's the epitome of grace and that power. But I always think if people want to talk about someone strong, guy was almost dead. His human form was beaten down so much.
And most men died just
through it.
Yeah, even before the cross.
Yeah. But in his moment of clarity, right then and there, he quotes scripture.
Yeah.
When he says, not my will, but thy will, he didn't speak his words, because imagine the pain he was feeling, the frustration he felt, but he goes and he quotes scripture, showing that it was never anything but God in control.
He was in control.
And that's so, shoot, even the best actor would not be able to remember their lines at that moment.
Yeah.
But he knew.
Yeah. So we've got Jesus, and he is the prime example. But Michael, what are some other illustrations throughout history? For me, one illustration that comes to mind pretty easy is Abraham Lincoln.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And I remember about 8 years ago, one of the first really, really big books I read. Yeah. It was like an 800-page book and 200 pages of notes called Lincoln, A Team of Rivals.
Yeah.
And Lincoln chose as his cabinet guys.
His opposition.
Well, many of them thought, I ought to be president.
Yeah.
I could do a better job than him.
Yeah.
And Lincoln had the power to just boot these guys, to pick who he wanted, but he was more focused on the mission than his own mission and glory. And so he's willing to share glory. He's willing to have people on his cabinet that will look him in the eyeball and say, dude, you're wrong.
Yeah.
He had the courage to say, well, maybe I am, but this is what I'm going to do anyway.
Yeah.
But what are some other illustrations of men that we can read their biographies about, we can read about, we can look up to, that understood power in the right way, who understood godly meekness?
Absolutely. And a little fact too, a lot of people know about Abraham Lincoln. He used to go around challenging people to wrestling matches.
When he was a younger man.
Yeah. So if you look at it, it's still, there's always that training that's involved to build that confidence, that skill. So one that I could think of, that we look in history is like, if you look at during the Civil Rights Movement, there were two very different opposite sides of the spectrum. And you look at like Martin Luther King Jr. and you also look at Malcolm X.
Oh, that's, night and day.
But their goal was still the same, to bring rights to people that were denied them. They, they were looking in all these different areas. And I think what was really interesting is that the power and it's not saying, a lot of people would say, well, one was wrong and one was right. Well, I mean, you look at culturally why, why there are many places, even you look at the United States, our Revolutionary War was a show of power against a domineering force where we didn't necessarily show restraint, but we pushed back and we fought back.
Well, and it was different, and we want to make sure we don't go too far, too many rabbit trails. Because this is fun, and we ought to have extended content where people can pay to get the. Yeah. But there's a huge difference between the American Revolution and the French Revolution.
Yes, tremendous.
100 years later, the Russian Revolution, where Lenin went in there and killed the whole family. Yeah. But and even that so Malcolm X, he was a Muslim. Yep. Part of the Muslim Brotherhood. King believed in Jesus. The interesting thing about it, so it was Martin Luther King Jr. Yeah. So his father, Martin Luther King, his father actually changed his name to Martin Luther after the German Reformation.
Makes
guy.
sense. Yeah.
So there's a worldview there.
Yeah.
That Malcolm X is like, dude, we're going to fight you.
Yeah.
We've been wronged, and by golly, we're going to get it right. And King spoke of, loving our brothers and sisters.
Yeah.
He was a powerful guy.
Yeah.
He was a powerful guy.
And the amount of restraint that you see, especially during that movement too, when you look at, and obviously I wasn't there, I'm 40 years old, so I wasn't there doing that, but the amount of restraint that they had to take getting thrown, insults, having people threaten their lives, having people throw stuff at them, and just standing their ground and showing that, look, I don't have to punch you back in the face to prove my point. And I think that's a powerful thing. And, especially we look at now and everything that we look at our culture right now, and there's definitely a side that will say, well, I'm going to get what I want. And and if you don't want to give it to me, I'm allowed to be violent against you.
Right. And it's
a dangerous place.
That's not where we're at. That actually is somewhat cowardly.
Yeah.
That, the strength is being able to say, I'm okay.
Yeah.
I don't have to have that.
Yeah.
My identity is secure in Christ, whether I get that or not.
Yeah. And I think that's like it ties into even the martial arts aspect too, is like, you have kids and you're going to have, students that come in that they have something they want to prove. And I would get students, and the Gracies are known for this. They had something called a dojo. It was basically a dojo storm when someone comes in there to try to take over, but they had something called the Gracie Challenge. So any guy that would come in that said, I want to challenge you, you had to represent the art and you had to accept that fight and to do that. Now, the interesting part about it, a lot of times in these scenarios, these guys would come in trying to prove a point, and at the end of the day, they leave signing a contract to sign up for the gym because the Gracies had enough restraint to show what is the ability. Now, there's a lot of speculation, and I don't know if it's 100% true. There's a lot of ups and downs about that, but the biggest thing where Royce Gracie was chosen for the UFC fight. A lot of people, there are some rumors that say, well, they chose him because because he looked weak. Now, other parties will say, well, they chose Royce over Rickson Gracie because Rickson, he didn't want to bother with them. He didn't want to be controlled, so they didn't use Rickson. But if you looked at Rickson Gracie and you looked at Royce Gracie, Rickson looked like a warrior.
Okay,
he looked the part, and he was the champion of the family. He was beating everybody up. He was super strong. He could have gone in there, shirt off, looked like an Adonis, and just mopped the floor with people. Some people say they chose Royce. Once again, this is speculation, because he did not look scary. He looked like an average guy that would go in there that had to use his technique. He had to use what he knew, not his strength, not what he looked like, not his power, to show that martial arts, that Gracie Jiu-Jitsu was effective.
Right.
And I think that's a big thing with meekness over weakness, right? And that you don't have to be a weak person or a strong person, but a strong person that has restraint. Because he knew what he needed to do to win. He didn't have to shine himself or look the part. He knew what it took to have victory. And I think that's a big point that we look in modern society too, is that we don't have to just be the loudest person.
Yeah.
We don't have to be the most domineering person. And in any kind of training, if you just go and bulldoze through people in life, and kind of brings back to the Andrew Tate, is like, like if anyone doesn't care about you, man, just smash through them. Who cares? Women are tools. Women are things that we want to be. And the problem is the fighter mentality in the ring. All of that makes sense. You're going in there to destroy your opponent. That's your job. But if you take that same mentality and blend the confidence with arrogance, because arrogance and confidence is really two very different things. A lot of people will say, well, I'm just confident. Yeah, but you're kind of a jerk, the way you're going about it. And I think young men that are looking towards something like this, they want to feel powerful. They want to feel in control. They want to feel empowered. However, it's the wrong stage. Because if they're in the ring, 100%, you got to go out there and you got to beat that opponent. But in life, it's a little different.
Yeah.
Because you're going to make more enemies than you will friends if you just run everybody over.
Yeah, and on a side note, the 1 year that I played football in elementary school, I was on defense, and I didn't realize that really my job was to kill the quarterback. I didn't, let's, X all the plays, you just kill the quarterback.
Run at him and grab him.
So practically, what are some ways that a young man can practically day in, day out begin to mature this idea of being meek, godly meekness, strength under control in the world that we live in today?
I think, and I think it's so important. And what I would say is, you got to do stuff that's hard.
Okay.
You have to train yourself. I think Joe Rogan, said one of my favorite things. And yes, Joe Rogan's awesome. Not perfect, right? But he's awesome.
Well, tell him to like and follow our podcast.
Like and follow Joe.
Then he will really be awesome.
You're amazing, brother. So one thing he says is like he makes sure that each day he does a workout that is very difficult, because then when he gets into a situation, and this is kind of the David thing, any principle is martial arts, you go in there and you train so hard that no matter what anyone comes to you, nothing they do is nearly as hard as what you just put yourself through. And it's principled. There's a documentary on the Chicago Bulls, and they said some of their, like during their Michael Jordan days and Scottie Pippen and all those guys, their practices were so hard that the games were so easy because they had done to themselves a strengthening in their practices that would never even come close to how easy the competition would actually be.
It reminds me of when I was a kid and the Soviet Union was still around. I think the 1980 Olympics, or maybe 80, I don't remember, 80 Olympics. Yeah, the underdog American nobody college guys whooped the Soviet Union.
Yeah.
You go back and you look at their practice. I mean, they were killing themselves. Okay, so there's this idea of, okay, guys, you just need to get out there. You need to discipline and work hard, whatever it is.
Get good at something. Okay. Train yourself. Focus. And it's not in comfort. Meekness is not found in comfort or just the warm blanket that, that you sit in. It's found that strength when you realize, like, as a young martial artist, when you're learning, you constantly want to prove yourself. And you're like, I can't wait to get in a fight. And you're thinking about, I'm going to do this and that and anything. And after you train for a while and you've been in a couple, actual real fights, either whether it's in the gym or in the things, you are less likely to and more reluctant to want to impose the strength that you have because you know what it can do. And so don't prove it to yourself by proving it to other people, but do something, become strong, and become confident in that strength. Get good at something, whether it's cooking, whether it's anything. You build a confidence in something that you know you can do well. And that's a strength. Whether it's physical stuff, I think every man should do, physical things anyone should learn how to defend themselves. So, plug for jiu-jitsu, #1 self-defense you could ever do in your entire life that can save you from real harm. Learn jiu-jitsu. Learn something that's harder than what you would normally do. And put yourself under that restraint of control, that bridle. And the same thing goes with the Word of God. Meditate on the things, not just the things that make you feel nice.
Okay, there you are.
But the things, like when you hear a message, and I know any church that you're going in, and I'm not bashing any churches, but any church that you go to, and all you hear is, flowers and roses and everything's good, and you're a Christian now, so you're saved, and you don't have to worry about anything. Well, I'll tell you what, the moment that you become saved, I've heard more stories than not that your target is aimed at you. So it's like when you identify as a child of God, there's a target that has now been placed. So be ready. Train yourself. They say
the Word of God,
meditate like it's a muscle. Faith is something that's not just, it says, work your faith out by what? Fear and trembling.
Right.
That's not a walk in the park. That's work. That's those push-ups. That's those extra rounds on the bag. I think Bruce Lee said it, and whether he said it or not, I think it's the same thing with any martial arts, than any discipline thing. So he says, I fear not the man that throw one kick. Let me say it right. I fear not the man who threw 10,000 different kicks. Tried all these things. But I fear the man who threw one kick 10,000 times.
That totally makes sense.
Because it's the proficiency of it. When you study the Bible, when you study anything, to become great, you need to be focused on it. You need to be hyper-focused on it to get good at it. And it's not going to come instantly. Anything that comes easy.
Play for the long game.
Yeah, anything that comes easy, question it, being like, wait, that was way too easy. Like microwave dinners, they're easy, but they're not really good for you if you really look at it.
They're not the most healthy
McDonald's
thing
is the fastest burger you can get. You go to McDonald's, you'll have it within 2 minutes. Actually, In-N-Out's really good. So maybe it's not the best example because you'll get it fast. But fast food we've known is not great for us.
Yeah.
It's not the best food for us. So I think really focusing on disciplining yourself, finding something that is difficult for you to do, that's hard, and do it.
Okay. What else? How can I grow in my life as a man, as a young man, with this principle of strength under control?
And that's the thing, like, You pointed. I listened to your podcast, so I know a little bit. But as far as what we're looking at is, look to surrender yourself to a discipline.
Okay.
So don't. My son is young and he's learning martial arts for the first time, and he's going in there and he has all these ideas of moves that he's thinking in his head. And one thing that he had to learn, and my son's 11, and he said, he's like, wait a minute, so you're saying I have to do it a specific way? And he didn't like that at first. And when you look at the way, like different styles of martial arts, there's some styles that are just very free form. But then you look at other styles of martial arts and there is a way. Like Taekwondo means the way of the hand and foot.
I've heard that.
And when they say the way, they mean a path. And what it is even in jiu-jitsu, even though there's so many different moves that you're learning and there's all these different moves and all these different things you can do and you're constantly learning and adapting, there is still a root fundamental that allows you to do, like we mentioned in the earlier about when he was cracking those nuts with his bare hands, like, why am I doing this? This is so stupid. But you're building a fundamental strength and skill and muscle, a fortified strength that will be there when you need it. But to truly focus on learning a way to keep yourself disciplined all the time, that you're not just accountable, and finding other men to do it with you or other people or a teacher to keep you accountable. And that's where, training martial arts is always great because you have other martial artists there that are going to keep you accountable. And that when you're feeling a little powerful, there's always one guy in that room that can make you humble again.
There's always a bigger guy. So what, and I know it, but I want to hear it. So you walk into a dojo and you're going to commit. What do you call the master?
So as far as you call the master, teacher.
Is there, maybe it's just Hollywood.
Yeah. Oh, so it depends on the style.
Okay.
It depends on. Okay. So if you go into
sensei.
So yeah, and all that means in every single place, like in Brazil, they call him professor.
Okay.
Because every single place you go and every single aspect of what you're looking to accomplish is you're looking to learn from someone.
Okay.
So in my martial art, what they called me kyosanim.
Okay.
Which basically just means a person of honor.
Okay.
But the whole point is you're going in there
and you're submitting to that guy.
And you're submitting to that guy. You're submitting to that place. You're submitting to that time. Like when we would go, and my kids used to do it walking into the bathroom because I've trained them since they were little. But whenever we were, entering the mat and we're about to step on the mat, we bow before we step on the mat. And we bow before we step off the mat because we're taking that moment and we're bowing. And a way I used to describe to kids, during that bow, I want you to think of, I'm devoting this time to just this. And I think even biblical and saying, well, we don't bow to anybody. That teacher can make you bow, if they really want to, and you submit. But I think biblically, when it talks about like a line that says, I come and bow down at your feet. When I truly submit to you to pour into me.
Well, that was kind of my thought process there. Romans 10:9-10. If anyone confesses Jesus as Lord.
Yeah.
And we'll look at Jesus and say, Jesus is my Savior. Well, he is. He died on the cross for my sins and he rose again. And we don't use the word Lord a lot today. We're not British. We're not Europeans, by golly.
Yeah.
That's a joke for European guys. But boss, master. And I think it's really easy for us to look at Jesus as, what am I going to get from Jesus? Instead of, okay, Jesus, you're the master.
Yeah.
And I have strength. You've given me strength, but under control. Whose control? Your control.
Yeah.
I mean, you are sensei. You are teacher. You are master. Coming to a place where Jesus really is master of my life. Yeah. Therefore, I follow his lead instead of mine.
It's interesting you say that too, because something in the Japanese martial arts and and Korean martial arts, there's some instructors that you'll find that they demand their students call them master.
Okay.
So something very interesting about the Brazilian style was their term isn't master. There are masters 100%. But one thing that I got from that crowd is that, like they've been saying, what do I call you? Professor, what do I call you? What do I call you? And something I picked up from them, they're like, honestly, well, let's train together first, and then you decide what you want to call me.
Oh, that's interesting.
And it's something I carried upon with myself is that there was like this ranking system with my Grandmaster, Duk Sung Son, who I'd trained under for many years. And one of the guys, they had tested for this belt, and they were a 6-degree black belt. And the one guy goes, well, you're a master now. And Master Sung was old, he was Korean, and he turns his head and he's, what? Who say master? And he goes, well, he's a 6th degree, Master Sung. He says, no, who say? Belt say master?
Okay.
And-
Yeah, that kind of goes back to what is my goal? Well,
Right.
I want to get this.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's something deeper than that.
So what he had said, I think was really fascinating, and you know, God bless you, Master Sung. You're amazing, and I thank you for all the teaching. Was he said, you know, the belt no say master, I say one master, and Grandmaster was a grandmaster. But there was an interesting analogy that he showed me with two great instructors. And if you hear your name, I love you. You guys are amazing. But this one guy, Howie, who was amazing martial arts, incredible. And another guy was from, I think it was from New Jersey, Jimmy Cahill.
Okay.
Jimmy Cahill was a master. Howie was the same rank. And if anyone would actually say, and Jimmy, I'm not taking any, but Howie was very strong and maybe could have whooped on
Okay.
Master Cahill. We were like, well, what the heck? Why is one? And Master Sung asked me, he pulled me in his office one time and he asked me, he said, why, you know, Jimmy, Master Jimmy, why Howie is not a master? So he asked me, why is one a master and one is not? I need you to tell me this.
Okay.
And I was like, okay. And
He's testing you?
he was testing me, I guess. And I don't know what for. I mean, I would talk to Master Sung, and Master Sung was an interesting person. Most people say, don't talk to him. He won't acknowledge you. I didn't care. I went and talked to him, and we actually, you know, ended up creating a relationship. But I looked over the time, and I looked at Master Cahill, and I looked at Howie, and Howie was kicking everyone's butt, and he was so good, and he was hanging out with his friends and everything like that. And I looked at Master Jimmy, and I noticed something. And I said, well, what? And then he asked me the next week, he said, well, what was it? You know, not like that. He barely spoke English, but I noticed, and Howie had no students of his own.
Okay.
But Master Cahill was devoted to teaching others. And he always had a group of students around him that he was bringing up. And no offense to Howie in any way. I mean, I don't know what Howie's doing. I know he was married, kids, young,
Yeah.
and everything like that. But he didn't have any direct students of his own. So, and Master Sung just smiled and he said nothing else.
Yeah. Yeah.
But at the same time, it made a revelation to me is that why should I be called a master of what? If I'm not teaching anybody, who cares? And that's what I've seen in all of, and Elio Gracie said something very powerful as well in the same context where he said, when I was no longer young and I was no longer able to compete and fight and win and be victorious, if I had tied my identity to just what I could do in the ring or what I can do in a fight, I would have failed years ago. But he changed his terms of victory to being able to teach and pass on his knowledge. And with that,
it's a bigger picture.
Master Elio was able to win and be victorious until the very end of his life in his late 80s. That's crazy. Because if we just identify what we can physically do and be strong and never give the ability to learn and to pass on what we've learned. We have a young adults group. At 40 years old, it's the weirdest thing to be not the young adult. I've always considered myself, I think I'm like 20 years old. But I look at the trials and the training like David, the training like Joseph had to go through that prepared them for moments where I'm able to talk to young men and also I'm like, hey man, I've been through that. And I didn't get through it, but here's how God helped me. Or, hey, I made this choice. Don't do that. It didn't work out so good. That God's going to prepare us with people on our path that we need to be willing and ready to submit to learn so we don't fall in the same traps that they did.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this last thing, Michael. As an older man, I'm older than you. You're older than them. But if you had a young guy, 20 to 25, and you only had 10 seconds, 10, 15 seconds, you only had one shot. You only had one shot to give him one piece of advice. What would it be?
I would say like anything, like in the martial arts tone and everything, as I would say, you need to find the ability to submit.
Okay.
The ability, and that's not to say I'm weak, but to say I'm strong. It's a choice. It's a choice to say, hey, I can do this, and I'm strong, and I need to be able to be restrained. And not just submit to anybody, but to submit to the discipline of both your physical self, learn martial arts, go train, discover that amongst yourself.
Whatever it is.
Whatever it is.
Yeah.
And that starts with your first discipline is a discipline of the heart and the mind, and that's submit to God's teaching. It is the best martial arts. It is the best training you could ever have in your body and in your mind to show you to be disciplined so that when you are in places of power, when you are disciplined and you have authority over others, which at one time in our life, we're going to have that we are not just powerful, but we are that meek that inherit the earth, that strength under control, that we do not just conquer, as Conan would say, slay your enemies, see them driven before you, but, because that sounds man mode. But the real man mode is like Jesus did, the one that had power to call upon legions of angels.
Yeah. Yeah.
But instead he laid down his life.
And trusted the Father.
And trust in him. And be strong in that. Be strong in that, because it's not easy. But guess what? There are other men out there that have done it.
All right. All right. Audience, don't mess with Michael. He'll kick your tail. Michael.
Thank you, brother. It's been a pleasure.
So, Matthias, if you and I had to do our discussion in like 10 seconds, here's how I would do it. I want our listeners, our viewers on YouTube who heard our discussion with Michael to know this, that because you are created in the image of God, because you are a man created in the image of God, that you have strength. The question is, are you wielding it rightly? Are you using the God-given strength in the right way? Are you being meek, strength under control, or are you being a jerk? Or are you being passive? Are you using the strength that God has given you? Because you are strong. Stand up. You can do this. You are strong, but using the strength rightly in the right way.
Right.
That's how I would summarize it. But I know there's just so much content here.
Yeah.
What do you got, Matthias? What were some things that struck you?
Yeah. So, I think Michael, the reason I said I think Michael was perfect for this interview is just because his perspective, his time in martial arts, and learning that aspect of surrendering and submitting to this teacher, this master, and learning all like the strength that you have, but also taming it, being in control of it, and not letting that control you in a sense, and not just kind of flaunting your power or your strength to people, but knowing you have power and restraining it and using it when and if appropriate, right? So some examples that he brought up out of scripture that I thought were really good, talking about Moses, Joseph, when Joseph said, I had this dream, all of you were bowing down, and his brother's like, excuse me, in that moment, Joseph, probably felt some
pride. And that may not have been the right time for him to bring that up, but he did.
But yeah, and it worked out. But, what that brought up for me was actually thinking of the opposite, because, Jesus says something about humbling the proud, right? Somewhere, you're a pastor, somewhere maybe, but yeah, but Peter is somebody I actually thought of, for example, kind of the opposite end of the spectrum. And I know with Moses, we've talked before, he humbled Moses, he was wandering in the wilderness for 40 years, so he brought, he exalted Moses, used him for his purposes, still used him for his purposes in the wilderness, but, it was a humbling experience. So anyways, back to Peter on this topic, I was thinking about Peter. He a bull in a china shop, as people like to call him.
Right.
And he had a lot of humbling experiences, I think. Just one, for example, when he walked out on the water and started to sink, Jesus says, why did you doubt? And then when they come to take Jesus, he cuts the ear of the priest off. And
the servant of the high priest.
Yeah, the servant of the high priest.
Yeah. He's like he's going to duke it out.
Right.
He's going to go fight.
Yeah, and Jesus corrects him there. He heals his ear and corrects Peter there. And then he also tells Peter he's going to deny him 3 times. And he's like, I would never. Well, then sure enough, he denies him 3 times, and then he weeps, So it's like Peter was humbled a lot, somebody who had strength, who wasn't afraid to show their strength. And he was humbled and brought down a little bit. And I think to realize, like, yeah, I've brought you in this position. You need to learn how to have that self-control. The fruit of the Spirit, one of them, self-control. I think that kind of goes hand in hand with this meekness of knowing your power, knowing your strength, but also knowing how and when to use it, and being submitted to that.
And I think, Matthias, there's a good lesson in that, because there are times that we're trying to walk by faith as men, and we get it wrong, and we think, well, I'm done. There are times that God does humble us. God does knock us around a little bit, but it's because he loves us and he wants to refine us. And I didn't share this with Michael when we were talking, but he and I mentioned a series of movies called The Ip Man, and I forgot what that stands for, but based after a real guy from, I think it was Korea. And in one of the movies, the second movie or the first movie, there's this guy that comes to him, and he's pretty arrogant. He thinks he's got it all figured out, and the Ip Man just humbles him.
Yeah,
just knocks him around, but at the end of the day, there's this relationship that's built, and you see in the next movie that this guy, honors the Ip Man and all that. But there is this reality that as we're growing as men, and we want to learn strength under control, but there will be times that we're going to mess up.
Mhm.
We're gonna make a wrong call. We're gonna do it wrong. But that's just part of the process. That's just part of the process.
Absolutely. Yeah. And to go back to those points about Peter, it was all for a purpose. My favorite scripture is, Romans 8:28, all things work together for good to those that love him.
Matthias.
And he's not just humbling you just to make a fool of you. And like we've talked about, it was in that interview with, was it Brian? I can't remember who it was with. Basically, he got up in front of everybody. He's like, I'm going to give the best sermon.
Yeah.
They're all going to repent right here now. And then he just blanked. And, he said, God used that moment, to humble me. And I was like, well, he doesn't just do it just to make you look like an idiot or make you look like a fool. It's for a purpose. So I just want to encourage people he wasn't just humbling Peter for the sake of making a fool out of him, but for a purpose for him to sanctify him, to make him more like God, to make him more like Christ. To make him more godly. And then, and there's another topic in this that was interesting to me. Was y'all were talking about how the mundane, the training, and kind of relating it to those movies is like, why am I training like this? This is so
Karate
stupid.
Kid.
The Karate Kid, and the other one, it was the Drunk Master. I think that he called it, or the movie was called.
Yeah, I haven't seen it. I've heard of the show, but I've never seen it. Well, I may have to watch it tonight. I don't know, but yeah, I know it.
But yeah, it was interesting to me because I'm as a man now. I've been kind of in the adult man world, working, having a family, having kids, and sometimes I just go through my week and it's just that mundane routine, and I'm just like, what is the point of this, Lord? Like, give me something exciting to do for you. Give me some purpose. And we've talked about this many times before, but it's sometimes that mundane, the routine, it's serving a purpose. And just like in the Karate Kid, or the Drunken Master, he gets to this fight and starts to realize like, oh, this was training. This was for this purpose. It's like, even though it was routine, just boring training that they didn't even think had any purpose, it serves something. So I thought that was interesting. Kind of gave me a new perspective on when I'm feeling like, oh man, I'm just bored. Like I'm just going through the motions, going through my routine. Yeah. Well, I need to recognize it's part of the mission. It's part of the process of sanctification. Even that can be, So I just wanted to kind of address that. And because I know a lot of people, especially right now, just probably struggling, not even just with purpose, but finances, this, whatever the struggle is. And you're just kind of go through like, what is the point of all this? If I'm not even getting anything out of this, well, there's going to be purpose. There's going to be a reason you're going through this, the mundane routine, the struggles, everything that you're going through.
Yeah, I like the football expression of, maybe for any sport, but I'm playing for the long game.
Yeah.
And I have to remind myself of that as well, Matthias, because I'm a visionary guy. I'm a big picture guy. I want to go take the hill. I want to go do it. But those battles are really won. We think of the exact moment of victory or defeat, but it's everything that leads up to that. It's the day in, day out. And that's where it's hard to be faithful sometimes.
Yeah.
And we just want to encourage guys to do that. But that's part of the discipline.
Yeah, absolutely. Man, and I'll just relate this kind of to my personal life real fast. So I made this video recently, and it did, for in my terms, fairly well for my channel.
Okay.
And I was like, okay, cool. I'm getting a little success on this video. I'm going to make this script, and I don't like this. I think it's detrimental to the church, but I've talked about it before briefly, is King James onlyism. I think it's a man-made doctrine, very full of pride. This and that. I think it comes from a good heart, but anyways,
it's kind of ignorant. It's not that anyway. Yeah. We are digressing.
Yeah, I digress. So I started making this script, and I was like, I'm gonna womp on some KJV onlyists in this script. I'm gonna go to the logical extremes here, and I recorded the video like 3 times with 3 different scripts, and each time I was like, this isn't turning out how I wanted it to, and I think the Lord was going, I'm giving you some power, I'm giving you some strength here, some room to speak, but don't get it twisted on who's giving you that room to speak. It's not yourself.
Yeah, and maybe that's a good question there when it comes to meekness, strength under control, asking. Who am I fighting for here? Am I fighting for my pride?
Right.
Or do I even need to fight?
Right.
I learned a long time ago, and again, I want to be honest when I need to be honest. I don't always get it right, but just because a person is right about something doesn't mean they have to share it.
Right. Yeah.
We're not talking a life or death situation here. Is it? is everything going to fall apart if I don't correct this error? Well, maybe not.
Yeah.
And do I always have, and that's part of the wisdom too with meekness, is knowing when to go to the mat and when not.
Right.
Choosing your battles. Everything that, and I'm still learning this lesson. I can think about ministry. There have been a couple things that have popped up that it just really triggered me. It just made me angry. But I stopped, and I had to stop and think, okay, I've got some anger. I've got, whatever. And I want to work through it. But this is not something that I need to start fighting about.
Yeah.
This is something that is not that big of a deal in the big scheme of things.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just, it's a tough topic. It requires a lot of self-reflection, I think, to constantly, and something I think that I've been learning a lot lately in my own life that I think everybody needs to do is question everything, including your own motives. I think a lot of that goes into this topic of meekness, that strength under control, under restraint, under submission, I think is a good word, to the master. Our master is our Lord Jesus.
Yeah.
Is our motivation, are we using our strength when we should and how we should, or should we even be using it at all here? I think that's ultimately the question to ask yourself when you're in, as a man in every situation.
And there are times we even have biblical illustrations of times where we do stand up and say, I'm not going to budge. Toward the end of Acts chapter 4, Peter and John have been preaching, and the religious leaders at the time grab them and say, we're commanding you to stop speaking in the name of Jesus. And they say, well, judge for yourself whether it's better for us to obey you or God. We know that salvation is found in no one else, and we're not going to stop. Now, when you take a stand like that, that may mean that you get the snot beat out of you too.
Yeah.
You look at the martyrs. There were more martyrs for Christ in the 20th century than all the preceding centuries combined together. There may be a time where you say, I'm going to fight in the sense of I'm not going to back down, and I may get killed. But why am I okay with that? Because the fight's not about me. It's not about me. It's standing up for Jesus.
Yeah, that's good. That's real good. I like that a lot. All right, Steve. So, with all this being said about, meekness, strength under restraint, what challenges do you have for the men today?
Yeah. Well, a lot of times I want to have two. I want to have a big, philosophical, heady type thing, and then something that's really simple and practical. And the big, heady philosophical thing would be to ask yourself, guys, who is your master? Is Jesus your master? And a lot of our listeners know Jesus. They're thinking about Jesus. Some of our listeners, viewers, don't know Jesus yet. But to ask yourself, who is your master? And here's why. Michael talked about, the sensei, the master. And when you're developing the discipline of jiu-jitsu or whatever it might be, whatever the flavor, whatever the style, there is the master, and there's this respect that the master says to do this, I'm going to do it. Why? Because I trust in the master, and I trust what the master's process is. So just asking that question, because even with people who are following Jesus, men who are following Jesus, they'll say it,
Yeah.
They'll especially say it on Sunday morning, or especially say it when they're with other Christians, but on a daily basis. When I go to work, when I go to school, when I'm with friends, family, or whatever, just asking, is Jesus my master? If he's really my master, that means I'm going to make choices that he would want me to make.
Yeah.
And I'm going to trust him. So asking that question, just beyond saying it, just thinking, who is really my master? And I want to encourage you, young men, to just think about Jesus Christ being your master, the perfect man in every kind of way. So the second thing is pretty simple, and it's a discipline thing. And I want to challenge you to be dedicated, to be disciplined, to get up every morning early at the exact same time, 6 days a week. I say tough. 6 because, well, it is. Yeah. So the Sunday is a Sabbath to rest. But if you're getting up every day consistently and early, that also means that you kind of need to go to bed early as well. In other words, it's so easy to get addicted to online stuff, games, media, conversation. following the latest Twitter thread and getting angry or whatever. But also it's a reality of, even if we're engaged in something, we can become workaholics and thinking, I got to get more, I got to get more, I got to get more. Well, no, I've got 24 hours and I do the best that I can with every day. So the challenge is, I just want to ask you guys, challenge you guys to go 30 days. And whether it's 6 in the morning, 5 in the morning, 7 in the morning, if you've got a late job where, you don't get home until 10, maybe it's 8, but to think about it, set a time, and then 6 days a week, Monday through Saturday, you get up, you set your alarm. And yeah, I know there are going to be exceptions. You're sick or maybe the Dallas Cowboys finally win the Super Bowl and you stay up late for that. There are exceptions, but the challenge is to begin to have a disciplined life, to craft and to hone the craft that God has put into me and made me. And it's a little tiny discipline of I'm going to get up every day early at the same time. And see that can form other disciplines. Our early episodes, we talked about the Bible. If I get up every day at the same time, I can grab some coffee and I can read a chapter in the Bible and then go on with the day. So there you are. That's the challenges. Number one, just ask yourself, who is my master? Not who do I say my master is, but who is really my master? And then the challenge of next 30 days, except for Sunday, I'm going to get up every morning early at the same time every day, which means I got to start going to bed at the same time too. So there you are. Those are my challenges in the man identity. So
sounds like some good challenges. Well, everybody, hopefully y'all do well especially the getting up early on 6 days a week. So I know I struggle with that if I don't have work that early.
and I don't, last night was a bad night for me. It was just a bad night. Yeah. And I knew, and I didn't get up when I wanted to this morning, but see, that's the deal. That's the exception to the rule. We want to establish some rules in our lives. Yeah. But, and ask, we talked about this before, but you can send us an email, themanidentity@gmail. Is that what it is?
That is. Yes, sir. themanidentity@gmail.com.
Yeah. And so men, if this podcast, whether you're listening to it in Audible or Spotify or Apple or whatever, or watching the video, send us an email if this is helpful to you. Recommend it to some friends, share it with some friends, make some comments, because we want to serve you. And guys, we want you to know that you are strong, and just use your God-given strength rightly in the right way.
Yes.
There you are.
There you are. Well, everybody, thank y'all for tuning into this episode. Make sure to subscribe, share, like, comment, follow, whatever platform you enjoy this on. Thank you. We'll see you in the next one. What is this, Dave? What do we always say?
Be strong.
Be strong.